Hello, everyone. I am presenting on systems research to identify legume options for sustainable intensification. Pigeonpea and Mung bean as test cases for scaling in West Africa. I am Princess Hayford, and I work on this project with Dr. Snapp. The goal of the project was to test case the suitability needs for Pigeonpea and Mung bean in West Africa. Why Pigeonpea and Mung bean? These two crops perform unique functions in cropping systems. Pigeonpea, a long-duration multi-purpose crop, is able to provide food and vegetation for fodder, and it has the ability to enhance soil nitrogen and phosphorus availability with its association with the roots biome. Mung bean, on the other hand, is an early duration crop that can be grown in relay and in intercrop systems for a hungry season food source and provides new avenue for income generation. Smallholder farmers in arid West Africa are challenged by insufficient access to land, inputs, and education. Also, food production and quality of diets are insufficient. And this may be due to the limited crops that are grown. These crops are sorghum, millet, cotton, cowpea, with few legume seeds available. Legume species options vary in growth types. Annual pulse crops are mainly grown for food and income, and they often provide modest soil fertility benefits. An example of an annual pulse crop is cowpea, as we see in this picture. Then when we look at perennial trees, they are good for soil rehabilitation with soil carbon gains and fertility, such as Gliricidia. But most often their products are few, which is limited to forage, fruits, and share nuts. Then we have the semi-perennial crops and intercrops. An example is pigeonpea. They are often win-win because they provide food and soil benefits. Pigeonpea can be grown as an annual or as a perennial. We did examine potential for perennial pigeonpea as a food or fodder crop in Bamako, Mali. And we realized that pigeonpea that were ratooned produced more biomass and grain compared to first year pigeonpea. So when I say ratoon, then what I want to say is after the first season of cultivating pigeonpea, the stems are cut off to leave about 30 centimeters for it to regenerate. And this regeneration results in more biomass and grain compared to the first season crop. And following expert interviews, we noted that the locally adapted pigeonpea varieties perform well. However, there was no documentation on genetic characterization and phenotype, and this is highly recommended. We went ahead to conduct a survey on pigeonpea research in Ghana. And from the survey, we noted that the improved pigeonpea varieties that are being tested are not adapted to the conditions in Ghana. The local genotypes that are usually long duration are showing promising signs of growth and yield. Then the dual purpose ones, the ones that are grown for grain and forage, they have high potential. And even when their branches are pruned, they still do not reduce yield, which is very good. Then we noted young farmers use pigeonpea as stake. and these are often grown as a mixed crop. So in this picture, we have pigeon pea and yam growing. So the yam vines will be climbing on the stems of pigeon pea to support their growth. Then a major production challenge that we noted in the wet season was the free range of livestock. And this is predominantly in the northern part of Ghana. We did a field experimentation where we evaluated pigeon pea as sole and intercrop with sorghum. We looked at two different growth types, medium and long duration. We had 5 cropping systems: sole pigeon pea medium duration, sole pigeon pea long duration, sole sorghum, sorghum pigeon pea intercrop with medium duration, then sorghum pigeon pea intercrop with long duration. This is sorghum pigeon pea intercrop. Then here we have a long duration pigeon pea and a medium duration pigeon pea. So we can see the contrast in growth of these two varieties. Following field experimentation, we did model parameterization and calibration in APSIM. And APSIM uses daily weather parameters. So these were measured on station. So we provided daily temperature, which is the maximum and the minimum, then solar radiation, then rainfall. Then we input soil parameters, then crop parameters, that is the sorghum and the pigeon pea that were grown. Then soil nitrogen, soil phosphorus, and surface organic matter. Then from there, we proceed to calibrating the model. We use the biomass of pigeon pea and sorghum and that of their grain yield to do the calibration. To be able to create crop coefficient, we use the phenology of the two crops to help us do that. And through the calibration, we have to make sure we get a balance between the observed and the simulated data. So we had to run the model for some time to make sure we created that balance. This figure shows the simulation of sorghum and pigeon pea, system evaluation over space and time for crop yields and water use efficiency. In the intercrop system, we noted that there was a little suppression from pigeon pea. However, the model was able to calibrate the system very well with their crop yield and water use efficiency. Then we simulated pigeon pea yield over a period of 30 years under fertilized and unfertilized conditions. And the results indicated that high phosphorus soil supports high to modest grain yield in most years with no crop failures. Then the interesting part was with the intercrop pigeon pea. Under no fertilized condition, we still had substantial yield from the intercrop system. And this is very good for smallholder farmers where access to fertilizer can be difficult. So if you have a cropping system that will not require application of fertilizer and will still give you substantial amount of yield, then that is a very good option to go for. Then with field experimentation and modeling, we looked at the system, overall system water use efficiency. And out of the 3 sites that we worked, we noted that 2 sites gave higher water use efficiency, with the intercrop system giving the highest water use efficiency compared to either sole crop sorghum or sole crop pigeon pea. Finally, we did crop climate suitability mapping, and this was done using Google Earth Engine. And in this app, you have to provide the location of the crop phenology parameters. So in this case, we wanted to create a map for Pigeonpea and Mung bean. So we provided those parameters in order to be able to create that map. So this is a Pigeonpea suitability niche that we created using the crop climate suitability mapping. And we realized that the northwest part of Ghana agriculture is limited by dry conditions. However, most of the agroecological zones showed favorable conditions for Pigeonpea cultivation, with only few areas in the coastal areas due to the overly humid conditions there. However, this was not the case for Mali. In Mali, we realized that most of the agroecological zones seem to be unsuitable for Pigeonpea production. But most of the suitability is limited to the southern part, which is good. Then we did the same for Mung bean across Ghana. For Mung bean, the potential for its cultivation is limited by excessive heat and moisture. Most of the agroecological zones seem to be unsuitable because of heat and moisture. However, there are few zones that indicate suitability for its cultivation. So what are the future prospects for these novel legumes in West Africa? From our studies, we can see Pigeonpea is beginning to be explored as a forage shrub and co-products of soil fertility, stakes, vegetable, and grain crop. The local land races that are grown are often in mixed stands, and the seeds are readily available in the markets. For the modern varieties that come from East Africa and India, they are mostly short and medium duration and are very low yielding. There is urgent need for genetic and phenotypic characterization of these local varieties that are available. And for Mung bean, there's almost entirely no research that is going on in West Africa and particularly in Ghana. However, there are few suitable niches for its cultivation in Ghana, and that needs to be explored. Thank you.